Moving in to the NFC North, we have the Chicago Bears. I think both of our floors are top 16 pick here. You know, they picked at 9 this year. They've made some really big upgrades in terms of in the receiving room, in the quarterback room, potentially. And then, you lock down Jalen Johnson, a lot of young guys making a step this year. And basically how their team is built, their roster is good enough where it's like they should be in the top half of the league in terms of where they're picking in the draft. They should be picking 17 to 32 this year.
Yeah, no. And I know, again, there's a lot of people in there in the comments, biased. No, I'm a Saints fan. I'm not a Bears fan. Like there's no bias here. I'm echoing your sentiment 100% as a non-Bears fan. And it's like, that's where people need to get a grip on this, because here's the thing too. Again, I'll be Caleb's number one defender. I don't give a shit. I'm a Saints fan. I will be Caleb's number one defender as I feel like I've been the whole draft process. I don't care. Dude, if any of you that have the nerve to sit here and kind of like, I didn't want to say question Caleb, but yeah, question Caleb. Look, you haven't cut on the tape. You clearly don't see the transition of like prospect to NFL ceiling. Like, yes, there's a process that goes about turning potential Hall of Fame talent into a Hall of Famer. Like, it's not just he's going to step in the league and be a Hall of Famer right away. But if you've been crunching the tape and you see what Caleb Williams' ability to do is, you hear how he verbalizes that all he cares about is winning football, the camaraderie he's already built with this team on such a short notice. There is no doubt that logically the Bears are going to improve this year. Again, granted, I don't know how much the improvement is going to be this first year, because there is going to be a lot to learn. There is going to be a learning curve for Caleb. But if you're one of these people who just thinks Caleb's going to step in and be a diva and miss the learning curve and flop out, I mean, I got bad news for you, because you're wrong. That's just not what's going to happen with the guy as talented as Caleb Williams. With the receiving core as talented as this, with a scheme that in Shane Waldron's scheme that is going to heavily complement this receiving core and Caleb Williams, it's just the Bears are not going to regress this year. They might not be a playoff team. They're not going to regress. And then to speak to the defenses as quickly as possible, you have a lot of young ascending, not stars, a lot of ascending young guys, a couple young stars, potential stars. Like, the Bears defense is nothing to scoff at, and they played really well towards the end of the season. If I tie all that together, how could I not say the Bears are going to have an improved season? I mean, that's just logically how I'm going to look at it.
I'll just leave it at that. And I just want to make a point that the jump from pick 9 to 17 is only 2 wins. Like, that's the reality. Like, their floor should be a top 16 pick because they should be 2 wins better than they were last year. Moving in to the Detroit Lions, we have them as an early playoff exit. This one is kind of simple because they were moments away from going to the Super Bowl last year, and I think only got better in the offseason. So if they're losing in the wild card round or divisional round, it's going to be very, very upsetting for Lions fans, because you added DJ Reader, you added the only thing that really concerns me about the Detroit Lions would probably be their wide receiver depth. Now, I know you could argue that Sam Laporta is probably your wide receiver too, and Jameson Williams can take a step, but outside of that, you lose Josh Reynolds, so you just kind of have Khalif Raymond. Obviously, you lose Jonah Jackson, so you bring in Kevin Zeitler. He's good. He's a little bit older. They upgrade the DB room. Like, I just looking at this roster and how they play for Dan Campbell, it is hard for me to say that they could miss the playoffs. I think this is probably going to be a number 1 seed, number 1 to number 2 seed in the NFC, or top 3 seed, I should say, between, the Eagles and the 49ers and the Lions. I think that's probably what it is. So losing early in the playoffs is probably their floor this year.
No, absolutely. And it's like, if you're willing to argue against that, you're just, and I don't really know how many of them even exist. Being a Lions hater just sounds foul. If you're a Lions hater, though, however, that's the only way you're going to look at this case and say that they're not going to be an improved roster that was already, to your point, a fantastic roster, a very much Super Bowl contending roster. And to your point, I wanted to add just only thing I really have to add, because you nailed everything. The wide receiver depth is definitely concerning, but the advantage the Lions have over a lot of other teams that maybe don't have the same wide receiver depth, I mean to say that same lack of wide receiver depth, is that the Lions had the advantage where the old line and the tight end play is just so good, and they're going to move so many bodies in the run game that your receivers have so much less to worry about because they're not the focus. Like teams are focusing on stuffing the box, figuring out how to stop the run. So you have just so much more opportunity, so much more one-on-one, so much more space as a receiver that it's like there's really just no excuse not to produce. It's kind of like how the Patriots used to be all the time, where you need one guy that's a really good pass catcher, or in this case, I get like two, right? It's kind of like literally like that's how the Patriots always operate. You have an X guy or a slot guy that's dominant. You got Gronk, and it's kind of the same thing now with the Lions. Like you got Amon-Ra, your slot beast, right, looking like a future Hall of Famer, and then you got Sam Laporta also looking like a future Hall of Famer, and the other guys, they don't have to be world beaters. They have to know how to sit in zone. They have to know when it's time to keep running. They have to know the simple, right? They just have to know simple cutoffs and what to do. And then if they do their job, they're going to be just fine. And they're pros. They've been in the league a long time. It's not like minus Jameson Williams, which is, I guess, the contingency. But to Jameson Williams' point, we have a lot of ceiling that probably still can be tapped into. So it's not like it's the end of the world. Yeah, they don't have tons of receiver depth, but you get a huge pass on your team like the Lions that can just maul people, and you get a bunch of cushion.
Moving into the Green Bay Packers, we have them as barely missing the playoffs for their floor. I think the thing is, like, between not Jared Goff, Jordan Love and CJ Stroud, I think the biggest concern for them is that coaches now have tape on them, and maybe we can stop what they were doing last year. Now, if me and Dobbs are both very high on Jordan Love, we think that the Packers could be, dark horse Super Bowl contenders this year. I could also see a year where their O-line doesn't perform like they wanted to. Jordan Love kind of gets caught up to a little bit. I still think he can learn from it, but it could just be more of a down year. And I could see them, they got hot at the end of the year. What if they don't get hot? So I still think this is going to be a very competitive team. I don't know if I would say they would be picking in the top 16, but there might be a scenario where, they may be that ace seed in the NFC.
No, and again, like I don't think that with the Packers, this is one of the teams when I do you agree with this. It's like when you were typing this, it's like you're like it's the floor,
Yeah,
but like
right.
there's a very slim chance they're going to reach their floor because as we already talked about in the ceilings episode. Again, before you leave some mean comment, there's a ceilings video too, guys.
Yeah,
this is not
there's
like
a happy one.
You know what I mean? Like we've discussed the positives. Trust me, this is just the negative side of things. Unfortunately, it's the yin and yang. We can't just discuss the positives without discussing the potential negatives. But a team like the Packers is that you lean much more towards their positive side. Like, yes, at their worst. Right. And I think there'd be a few things that have to happen for that to happen. And you already nailed one of them. Like if the line play has a big dip and guys go down, Elton Jenkins isn't healthy for the majority of the season or the full season. And then Jair Alexander's dealing with injury issues again on the defensive side. I think it takes a lot of things like that because the way this team is built right now and with Jordan Love is just like, I just don't see regression really in the books at all unless something catastrophic were to happen to like a bunch of very important people or like if Kenny Clark has a big injury. It's like, you would need one of the absolute like cogs of this Packers machine to go down for anything really tragic to happen. And it's like, I'm not going to like zone in on that being the reason of something happening. So it's like, the reality is this Packers team should make an ascension. If they don't, they're going to barely miss the playoffs and it's going to be a few minor changes and back to still the same team core because there's nothing about this core is going to change, right? It's kind of just the reality.
Right. Moving into the Minnesota Vikings, we both have them as a top 10 pick. I think the overall concern here comes from the quarterback position. I like that they added Dallas Turner. I think he'll be good for them. I think he'll work pretty good in the Brian Flores defense. Their cornerback room outside of Sean Murphy-Bunting is pretty questionable. But the season is really going to hit.
You mean Byron Murphy? You always
I always mix them up, bro.
You Sean Murphy-Bunting is I don't know
on the Cardinals now.
You always like put Sean Murphy-Bunting instead of Byron Murphy. You gotta reverse them.
I know. I have them mixed up. My apologies. Byron Murphy. I don't like their cornerback room. Their defensive line. I like that they added Grenard. They have Ivan Pace. They have Cashman. And Andrew Van Ginkel's good. I think their defense is fine. And I do like Jordan Addison. I love Justin Jefferson. Obviously, like these are not like any shockers. T. Hawkinson is going to be out for the first half of the year, probably, maybe even a little bit more. Aaron Jones, I think, was the best addition that they could have had to the run game. I think picking him up was super underrated. But we know what Sam Darnold is. We don't know what J.J. McCarthy is going to be. And I would bank on J.J. McCarthy being more successful under Kevin O'Connell and having those weapons than not. But we don't know when J.J. McCarthy is going to start.
Yeah, and again, it's funny because Vikings fans are like really defensive. I don't know why. Like I don't know. This did like in the comments recently. Like Vikings fans are like really defensive about their squad. And I want to be clear. It's not a bad thing. Like Vikings fans, it's good you have a lot of faith in your squad. It's good you have a lot of faith in Kevin O'Connell. That's the point. Trust me, Viking fans. Let us be clear. It is me and Hunter do not have zero faith in the future of this team. I actually would say I can't speak for Hunter, but I'll say for myself, I have plenty of faith that the Vikings' vision for the long term actually looks really good. But that doesn't always translate to this first year. And especially, because I'm saying first year in terms of the JJ McCarthy era, which is what Vikings fans expect and want to be the long-term solution. You can't just expect JJ to come in here and light it up year one. It just usually isn't how things work. There's a developmental arc. There is. You use Josh Allen as your kind of example in this case. It doesn't matter how high a player's ceiling is. It takes time to get there. This is not Madden. There is not just someone sitting there with the controller finding the open. It takes time. Getting used to NFL concepts, NFL timing, it all takes time, right? And the bottom line is, though, you have a lot of good depth outside of the QB position. So to the point of like, it's not the roster we don't have faith in. It's just the situation at quarterback. It's gonna take time. It's a timing situation with the Vikings. It's nothing more, nothing less. You have a lot of good pieces on both sides of the ball. And I also just wanted to say, because it's true, like we're with the Byron Murphy, with your thing, Byron Murphy, Sean Murphy bunting.
Yeah.
My version of that is Byron Young, and then who I always mix up Byron Young with, dude. I always mix up Byron Young with Byron Murphy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
just sometimes it's everybody has like one player like that where the names are similar enough you mix them up.
Always.
So I'm definitely not innocent on it either, bro. I know exactly how that goes. But yeah, the bottom line with the Vikings is you have really good pieces all over. The Blake Cashman edition, Chef's Kiss, did not get enough attention this offseason. I think he's going to be a huge part of this team for a long time if he can just stay healthy. Biggest contingency with him. But yeah, bottom line, future for the Vikings looking really bright. Immediately though, there's going to be a little bit of rain before the sun can shine.